Ever since the 1970s, doctors believed that a video game could trigger a heart attack. So in this video, we're gonna break down how gaming can be a fatal attraction. Coming right up. Hey y'all, Aman here, and you're watching Heart Limits. Now, gaming in itself, it's something that I guess you could say I'm into. I have the PlayStation 4, I have a PC, and all the gaming peripherals. Well, now, gaming in itself is great because, you can create a world of your own. You can be a person that you want to be it, something that can be in the real world or something in the fantasy world. And the cool thing is, of course, it's also a place where you can make friends and, show off your skills and be competitive in some way. But the problem with gaming is that it can actually be fatal because of a couple of factors. And to simplify, let's say there are three, okay? Number one is involved with the intensity of the game. Number two is your environmental factors. And number three is the position that you retain while you are gaming. So, let's start with number one. Now, with intensity, it's quite common. Most people will think, of course, if a game is very intense, it's very scary, requires you to do some certain motion, like when you play with the Wii, or you play VR or something. Most people already connected with that, of course, since you're doing, a lot of effort and that it's scary, it's a stressful game. People already assume that intensity is all just because of that. But the thing is, the biggest factor that actually impacts it is not only more of the physical, it's more of what happens inside your brain. Now, what happens is, whenever a person is faced with a situation, and it could be riding a roller coaster, it could even be playing a game, what happens is our body, whenever it feels this type of, danger or stress, the body releases these fight or flight mechanisms, which is basically adrenaline. And what happens is, if you play a game for too long with high intensity, your body is obviously going to keep releasing this adrenaline nonstop because it needs to power up your body for that, incoming danger. The body has its limitations, and most people are not aware of that. And the problem is, if a person stays, playing a game that is highly intense for more than 10 hours, it could actually be proved to be fatal. Because, okay, let's try to simplify this, okay? Now, the human body has a nervous system, and mainly there are two parts that are involved when you play a game, okay? So you have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically the yin and yang, okay? Now, the sympathetic uses the energy because that's where, the fight or flight system comes in. So, of course, if you're using energy, where does the energy come from? So with your parasympathetic, that's where it recovers and builds some amount of energy. Now, of course, since if you play a game intensely for a long time, your yin and yang becomes kind of disoriented in some way because you're using so much energy, and the problem is you run out of energy at some point. So to say, because of how intensely you play for a long time actually puts some risk on a person's health. You can actually even die because of this. Now, number two, when it comes with gaming becoming a fatal attraction, it also involves the position that you are at. Now, most of the time when people play, they're usually seated on a couch, and they stay in that position for a long time. Or when they're on a PC, they have this position where they're seated like this, and the whole time they're just glaring at their monitor screen. And the problem with that is that usually when it's a seated position, here there is such a thing called the economy class syndrome. What happens is basically your blood starts to pool down to your feet because you haven't hydrated yourself well, you haven't been eating well, and because you've retained such a position for a long time that gravity makes the blood go down to your feet. Problem with that is it has a hard time going back up and also because of that, your blood can become thick in the end, which could result to blood clots, a couple of other complications, could even be a heart attack and even death. And number 3, and this one is very dependent on the place where you are. So it's kind of, you could say, environmental factors, okay? Now, normally, most people, when they play a video game or something, usually they are in a cramped space. And sometimes, especially if it's a public space, let's say for instance, you play in an internet cafe. Problem is, since it's enclosed and there's lots of computers, the computers actually exhaust a certain type of heat and certain fumes, which are actually quite toxic to a person. Sometimes, some places, there's lots of people that smoke. So of course, in that place with all the smoke, with all the computer heat, be it even from a PlayStation or something. Problem is, with all of that combined, it actually has a way of also affecting the human body. It kind of serves like, a toxic, you could technically say it's air pollution, okay? So, remember, when you are into gaming, whatever game it is, no matter how intense, to play safe, try to get a few breaks every once in a while. Because, it would be really, really sad if, it just pops up in the news, which I'm sure you've heard at some point, like a gamer dies playing an online game or whatever type of game for like 12 or 24 hours straight, and he was found dead on his desktop. That's just such a sad news. And of course, people are like, what? How is that possible? Maybe he has some certain complication in the past. But in the reality, it all involves these 3 main factors. So, once again, Aman here, and you're watching Heart Limits. Now remember, if ever you have a heart problem or a heart complication, all of these are amplified to an extreme. But if you don't have any heart complications, these things can still occur and is quite dangerous. So, once again, see ya.